Hello and welcome to Executive Exchange. I'm Lisa McLeod. I'm a director at FT Strategies, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Jon Slade, who is the CEO of the Financial Times. Jon has been in the role since July 2025, so almost exactly a year, after more than 2 decades in the business. And during that time, Jon has played a central role in the FT's transformation into one of the world's leading digital subscription news organizations. Before becoming CEO, Jon served as Chief Commercial Officer, where he was responsible for the majority of the FT Group's revenues, spanning subscriptions, advertising, consultancy company, and print. And he helped develop the FT's digital subscription strategy, oversaw the growth of our company, FT Strategies, and also led the turnaround of the advertising business, despite wider industry headwinds. So with nearly 30 years in the media, Jon is widely recognized as one of the industry's leading voices on how to keep journalism sustainable, on digital transformation, AI, and building commercially successful news organizations, while also maintaining editorial independence. And today we're going to discuss the role of data and AI, the opportunities and challenges facing the industry, and what it takes to build long-term competitive advantage. So Jon, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me. And yes, it is nearly 30 years since I joined the publishing industry.
It is.
Next year will be 30 years. So yeah.
Wonderful. What a wonderful career.
Terrifying. Yeah, wonderful.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, you've been at the FT for 30 years and you've been watching everything that's happened around you and you're paying attention to everything that's happening around you, and then you become CEO of the company. So there must be things immediately in mind, things that you've been wanting to change, that you want to change. What are your priorities and what are you focused on?
Well, let me start with the things I don't want to change. Okay. So I've been at the FT, not quite 30 years, but a fair while.
Fair while.
And there are some things that I think have been perpetual to the FT since we started in 1888, and that is an adherence to great journalism that has integrity, that is honest, that takes truth and trust and facts very seriously, and feels that it has an important role to play in the world. So I don't want to change anything to do with that, because that seems like it's working really well.
Yes, don't fix it if it ain't work.
And the business is in great shape. So we are a growing business. Our financial performance is strong. Our audience is growing. We have a lot of pride in our culture at the FT. So there's lots that I don't want to change. But I think it's also fair to observe that we're in a period of particular disruption. And I talk about 4 forces of disruption, which I think all require a response. I am an optimist by nature. I'd be in the wrong job, I think, if I wasn't. And I think overall, whilst these are forces of disruption, net and on balance, they are opportunities rather than risks. But as I say, they require a response. So the first of those 4 forces is continued economic volatility, geopolitical volatility, breaking news. I don't think that is going to get any less, those forces are going to get any less volatile in the next few years. So that requires a response from the business, which is to ensure that we are in a sustainable place to withstand shocks, but also agile enough and fleet-footed enough to realise the opportunities that come with that. And there's also a particular opportunity in that is our business to cover geopolitics, economics, finance. So whilst those areas are in flux, are volatile, that's a huge opportunity for the FT newsroom and for the FT business. So that's the first big factor. The second big factor is the huge disruption and the accelerating disruption of technology. Not entirely AI, but very much AI. There's a lot of opportunity for the FT in that. And again, perhaps the biggest opportunity is as the world and the information ecosystem becomes more and more full of AI-driven information and people are less trusting and trustworthy or less trusting of what they're reading and listening to, there's a great opportunity for an organisation that takes trust and truth as centrally, as seriously as we do. The third big disruptive factor is the changing reading habits of readers, but in particular younger readers. We have to observe that. We've all seen it in all media and news organisations. We have to respond to it. We need to meet them to some extent on where they are. We certainly have to understand whether we are serving the needs, particularly of younger readers, in a way that they would expect, and that is changing rapidly. Where they draw trust from is no longer hierarchical. They're looking more to their peers and to social networks, obviously, for where they're drawing trust and influence from. That's a great opportunity for us as well to prove the value of the FT. And the fourth and final area of disruption that I note in particular is the assault on truth and trust and facts, and in particular from political institutions. And again, the opportunity for the FT is to stand proud and say we won't be bowed by these forces and we will continue to report without fear and without favour. All of those are significant factors. They are affecting society at large. They are, all four of them, certainly affecting the media industry, and the FT is not immune. But they require a response, and on balance, I'm optimistic about our opportunity to do well from them. So those are the things that I bear in mind when I think, what do we have to change? That's a long-winded way of getting to an answer to your question, which is we have been a relatively fragmented organisation. We could be more centralised. And so we're doing some structural work to make sure that we reflect the needs of our customers better within our structures rather than reflecting our structures outwardly to our customers. And I think there's a moment for us to be confident about our brand and its value and the value of our journalism. I don't want to change that too much, but I think we could amp it up a little bit more.
I can imagine that cohesiveness is a great opportunity for the FT moving forward as well. So just in terms of the FT's brand and also the future value of the brand, you did a wonderful speech earlier this year at the News in the Digital Age event. You made a very striking statement at the event, which was that content is abundant, distribution has become always frictionless, intelligence is increasingly cheap, but human judgment remains very costly. The question is really if information and intelligence are becoming cheap and replicable commodities, and in such a fast-paced environment, how does the FT practically monetize that costly human judgment beyond the paywall? I mean, this is something that we've almost pioneered in the early days. We were, first to market with hard paywalls, first to market with metered paywalls. We've done lots of work in that space over the years. What more is there in terms of that judgment? How do we bring value to people?
Well, I think information's becoming cheap. I'm not sure intelligence necessarily is, and I certainly don't think judgment is either. I did some rough maths. I think there's about 6,500 years of experience in our newsroom.
What a great stat.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, if you look at the distribution curve, actually let's not look at the distribution curve, but roughly speaking, I reckon 6,500 years of experience. That has immense value. Quite how we articulate that value, I think we could be more confident in doing it. I think we could be more explicit sometimes in our product articulation about the intelligence that this provides, rather than assuming that people can necessarily extract intelligence from a piece of journalism. And I think there are lots of exciting experiments we're doing using AI to extract specific intelligence. One of my favourites is we've analysed the last 40 years of FT journalism to see if we can do a better job of looking at some of the semantic analysis in that, or using semantic analysis rather, to predict what interest rates might do, or what inflation might do, or where there are particular areas of risk. Now, the output of that is probably a numerical figure. It's up or down, but it's really deep intelligence that you're not going to get necessarily from just reading articles as atomic units. But we can build an intelligence layer around our archive that allows people to extract that intelligence from all of that work we've done over many, many years. So it becomes almost predictive in that sense. I think that's a really exciting area of experiment.
Well, it's really exciting, and also very much in the sort of blue sky area of what people will pay for in the future, and what, where you can really attach a lot of value.
But I think they'll also pay for the human experience, and that means that our events business, I think, which is already very strong, I think has a terrific future in front of it. I think people are excited and switched on to the benefit of community, and that community is sometimes virtual, but it's very often in person. So when I sort of reflect on what our opportunity looks like, I think we made a lot of great decisions over the last 10, 15 years about how we wanted to run our business. I'm not seeing anything that tells us those decisions were wrong. If anything, we need to just turn the heat up on them. So thinking about how does our events business really lift off? How do we really use some of the analytics and the data and the technology infrastructure that we've built to extract from that brilliant journalism more signals or predictive indicators of what the future might look like? So I think that gives me reason to be optimistic about this volatile world we're in.
I mean, but coming back to your question about coherence, I saw something a little earlier about how we've got so much better at understanding how one audience morphs into another audience or morphs from one product to another. Certainly with the events, seeing a much higher rate of subscriptions coming out of our events audience, for example, which is something I don't think that we've always been good at, but are becoming so much better at.
Well, when it's happened, it's generally been unintentional. So just to give you a sort of small reflection on that, and people watching this may find parallels in their own business, we've had 7 different instances of Salesforce in the FT, all running in parallel. That's a slightly techie point, but what it means
it's a really
is
important point.
7 different customer groupings in databases that don't talk to each other. But absolutely, if you look at the life cycle of an FT customer, and I use the word customer rather than reader, they want to experience an event. They might want to be a digital subscriber. They might want to take the weekend newspaper. They might want to look at some of our specialist titles or attend a specialist event. And they move through different stages of life, from school student to university student to early career, mid-career, late career, and retiree. We have brilliant products, but we have at this point no sort of programmatic or mechanical way of joining up that life cycle.
That person.
So where that person has become an FTE live event attendee because they were a subscriber or vice versa, that's great that happened, but we didn't make it happen. Now, the work that we're doing to integrate those databases and to structure our company such that the life cycle is built into how we think and run our business means that those opportunities are really very much more there for the taking.
And I'm sure the customer would also appreciate being recognized as a long-term...
Putting what the customer wants at the front and center of how we structure and operate our business, rather than putting our structure in the middle and saying, hey, customer, you navigate your way through what we've got. We are the way we are, which is somewhat fragmented and increasingly less so, but because we've invested in diversification, because we've invested in developing new products and new services, and we've bought new companies and started events businesses and so on and so forth. But if you don't take a moment to sort of stop and say, if we were doing all this again from scratch, would it look like this? And if it does, fantastic. Likelihood is it won't, then you're really not going to be making the most of the investments that you've made up until this point. So that's really what the first period of my CEO tenure has been about, is reimagining how you join these things up in a way that puts the customer, and we have 2 customers who pay us to read our journalism, and customers who pay us to reach the customers who are paying us to read our journalism, our commercial partners. Those are our 2 central customer groups. And we now have 2 structured teams that support exactly those customer journeys.
Customers, And this is really good to hear, because the certainly with the audience that'll be watching this, there is a constant refrain about wanting to be customer first, wanting to be customer centric, putting the audience first, meeting them where they are. But the structures that we operate in often do not reflect that in reality. Whether that's the way we do our editorial, the way we are structured commercially. It's fantastic to hear concrete examples of how you can make that happen in reality.
I mean, how incentive schemes work.
Exactly.
And incentive schemes aren't just financial. I think, and I find when I talk to colleagues at the FT, their incentives are often about how do we do a great job together. Now, if we are financially rewarded by that, brilliant. But I am incentivized, I want to be incentivized to collaborate. I don't want structures, systems, processes, technologies that pull us apart. And that, I think, drives such an immense amount of frustration amongst an incredibly talented group of people. So I think that's an easy win, relatively easy win, because it's us getting in our own way. It's not a competitor or an outside force that's putting those obstacles in. And so we take a moment, take a step back and think, well, what does better look like? Okay, now let's move towards that point.
And how do we unblock it to make it work?
And that's the process that we're deep in at the moment.
Fantastic, thank you so much. You said yourself that AI is a design and governance choice, it's not destiny, and human judgment is the ultimate differentiator, as we spoke about just now. But when you look at the FT's own operations, what is a specific area or areas where you have thought about AI capability or efficacy or whatever it is, and consciously said, no, this is going to stay entirely human or predominantly human, because that if we had to bring in too much automation or generative AI or whatever, that would dilute our trust, the trust that our audience have in us. I mean, obviously editorial is the obvious
that's the answer.
Yeah,
that's absolutely the answer. So our editor, Rula Halaf, said very early in
Yeah.
the generative AI era that FT journalism will always be produced by humans.
Yeah.
And, you know, at one level at the time, it felt like quite an odd statement. Of course it will be. I think it felt very intuitive to us that would be the case. But it isn't necessarily intuitive. And I think it was a really important statement for Rula to make early. And there is no chance at all that we will ever change that.
Right.
That doesn't mean to say that AI, of course, isn't involved in the whole process of the production of journalism, but the articles are written by humans.
Yeah.
They are ultimately edited by humans, and nothing reaches the website until a human has said, this is an article that we're happy with. Now, of course, we use AI in the process of optimizing aspects of that, of searching for stories in big unstructured sets of data, in thinking about how you might create a visualization. So, of course, it's involved in the supply chain of that journalism. But that is where our judgment sits. That is our value. That is our business model. So, yes, that's unsurprisingly the area that will remain untouched by it.
It is a really interesting answer, because I think this is something that is on many people's minds at the moment. Is, you know, we've just done a piece of research that showed that the predominant benefit of AI in most newsrooms is seen as being time saving, for example, and, you know, cutting through certain layers of production to save time. And on the flip side, there's the idea that AI could be used to just really research and find these incredible stories, and therefore actually bolster our offering to readers, which is also a really good idea. I mean, do you think that while that might be the state right now, do you think this could become more layered and nuanced in future?
I think there's a bit of a paradox with AI adoption, and I don't think it's exclusive to the news industry. I think it's industry-wide, which is, if you've always done something in a certain way, when a piece of technology comes along that on the face of it just does things faster, the instinct is to say, how do we apply it to the thing we were already doing to do it more efficiently, faster, better, whatever. Great, but really that's iterative and incremental, I think. If you look at how AI is being used by organizations that are use a dreadful phrase, AI native, in other words, have no history, but are inventing themselves from the beginning with AI in mind, then they are very different organizations. And we're seeing that in a lot of white collar roles like consulting. We're also seeing that in aspects of industry and software development. I think it's hard for organizations such as the FT to take a moment to completely reimagine how we might take a process like sales or marketing or operations or finance and say, if we were building this at a native level, using AI from the beginning, how would our outcomes be achieved in a different way? How would we still achieve the same benefits as a consequence of those outcomes? I think that's hard for institutions to get their heads around, but I think if we're going to really unlock the value of AI at the FT, in the news industry, more broadly as society, that's the sort of level of thinking that we have to get to. I think we're still very much at a sort of an experimental, iterative level broadly when I look across industries as a whole. So that's the sort of thinking that I'm wanting to encourage, really. If we were going to do this again, how would we do it differently with AI alongside from the beginning?
Very interesting, and I think there are great rewards to be had for those who can get it right, but while bearing in mind the trust foundation.
I think also, if you think about it in the context of journalism, if you think that the output that we're driving towards is an 800-word article, then
at the moment.
Well, if that's what you think the output is,
if that's what you think it is,
and it's got some advertising around it, and it's got some sort of subscription layer in front or behind it, then if that's what you think your product is, then you're only ever going to be applying AI in an iterative way to improve the processes that sit around that. If you sort of stop and reimagine what journalism might be, so journalism is, I mean, to take that example I gave you earlier, journalism is a really highly rationalized, statistically solid prediction of where risk is going to emerge in a certain part of the world, and that's a map, or it's an interest rate prediction that is more accurate than the Bank of England.
Or an anomaly.
Right. Then that's not an 800-word article.
No, it's intelligence.
That's a very different type of output.
Indeed,
So I think by reimagining what value you might create, you might then begin to reimagine how technology can help you get to that point, rather than just sort of iteratively improve the thing you were doing already. That's not to say you shouldn't do both, right? But I think it requires a state of reimagination about what is journalism. It's trying to provide a service to a reader to help them make a better decision. We've traditionally thought of that as an 800-word article or a 20-minute podcast. It need not be. So what imaginative states still get us to that same service and outcome to the reader,
Exactly.
but where we question the form and the format of delivering that
Precisely,
value.
yeah. And that brings a lot of, it's par for the course. And I think this is something that we're just feeling in the industry a lot at the moment. You know, I mean, there's a huge amount of uncertainty, particularly around those building blocks that we've always understood intuitively being somehow disrupted and changed. But this is the nature of progress.
I think it is. I think it would be strange if there wasn't a degree of uncertainty. I think it is also very much a moment to seize the opportunity. I think people need to become familiar with the technology. We did a big board session just last week. We spent the whole morning with an excellent organisation helping us to figure out how could we solve some of the challenges of a board in an imaginative way, using the tools that are already at our disposal. You know, we have to role model that, I think, from the top of the organisation, just rethinking how we might do something.
Becoming creative.
Yeah, I mean, I have some concerns about some of this. I mean, we were looking at an area that we might want to expand into, which is not currently something that we do. We have a brief for this area, and it's whether we should be experimenting with membership. Now, about 2 months ago, we asked a smart bunch of people in our strategy team to go away and answer the same question. And they've answered it in a brilliant way, and we have an excellent piece of work from them which answers the question and says, here are the options of what it can do. We got to a similar point in about 45 minutes using prompts for AI, and it's a great output, right?
Amazing.
Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other.
Please don't.
Well, here's the difference. Nobody got wiser producing the piece of work that took us 45 minutes. But what we now have in the organisation is a number of people who've spent the last couple of months really understanding what is membership, how could it work for the FT, what are our different... That's what we don't get with AI. We get a shortcut, but we don't get institutional knowledge.
That's very true.
And I think that's the bit we've not got right. And I think we've got to pay attention to. Because what we're trying to build in an organisation is institutional knowledge. We're not just trying to get to the output.
Not about speed, it's about the process.
Right, exactly. And I think there is an important question here for leaders to make sure that they are demonstrating to their colleagues and to their teams, we care as much about how you get there and what you learn along the way as we do about the output itself. And I think there can be a temptation for people to think, well, if I can just get my boss that output quickly, then that's great. That's not what we want. We want you to learn along the way as well. So how we role model that and the expectations that we set as leaders of organisations, I think is really, really important before bad behaviours start to set in. And I think you absolutely see that in the educational environment as well. And I read a brilliant piece of research last week from a large data set that said students who are using AI are getting better test results, but within 6 months are falling behind their peers. So in other words, they're getting to the answers fast, but it's not absorbing. And I think that parallel applies in the workplace too.
They haven't understood the full thinking behind it.
Exactly that. And I talk to educators and teachers, and I know they very much share that concern. And I have that concern as a leader of an organisation as well.
Reminds me of Lionel Barber, the former editor, who always used to say, or particularly during the big .com boom and moving to digital journalism, he always used to say, we'd rather be right than first.
I knew that was. I mean, that is a quote
that just really reminded me
well.
of what you just said, because it's exactly the same thing. You know, we'd rather get it right than just fly in without really fully understanding where we're going. So
humans are still going to matter, I think.
Yes. So still, I mean, I suppose philosophically, I suppose the FT has always, because of the nature of the brand and the strength of the brand, has always proceeded with a degree of caution. And do you feel this is still the way that you would continue? Taking risk, but making sure that the brand is protected at the same time?
Yes. Is the answer. If the question is, would you risk the brand in order to move quickly, then no.
Got it.
However, we do work in a world where we have to take some risk. If I'm being really honest about us at the FT, sometimes we don't let anything out the door until it's absolutely perfect.
Yes.
And that can sometimes sort of fly in the face of best practice around, well, let's just test this out with a few customers first.
Thinking.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So that's a tension and a balance that needs to coexist.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get it absolutely right. Sometimes we can get it a little bit wrong. The brand and the protection of everything that brand stands for is paramount.
Yeah.
But we also, as I said earlier, it is a moment to be agile.
Things, yeah.
And so we have to move quickly too. I think that's an element of our culture that we have to keep close eye on.
I've always been fascinated by that, the fact that the concept of a minimum viable product, for example, is something that media organizations find it quite difficult to get behind because of it being less than perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, our DNA is to produce a perfect product every single day, and to put things out to the audience that may not be
That's exactly right.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Yeah. So speaking of doing new things, taking risks, one of the things that you've done, or that the FT has done quite recently, is to help found the Spur Coalition. So this is the standard for publisher usage rights. Recently just expanded quite significantly, 30 new members. We were at the WAN IFRA Congress in Marseille when this was announced. So now 36 global organizations, with the FT being one of the founding members. What is the FT's ultimate strategic goal with Spur? I mean, how do you see this developing? What is the purpose in your view? You know, what do you want from it, from this in the long run?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I think it's unprecedented in my experience of working in the news industry, not only to see this degree of cooperation, but to see it assemble so quickly.
I would agree.
So it's so it says to me there is a need and a demand and a recognition in the industry that this is a helpful thing to do. What we're talking about here is what we imagine to be, what we expect to be, an emerging market for licensing data. Let's call it what it is, though. It's journalism that's turned into data. To organizations that want to use it for the purposes of an input to a large language model. And that could be a software developer themselves, so one of the big technology companies that develop LLMs, or it could be a corporate organization that wants to license from us for their own in-house AI capability, where they want that information service. I am optimistic about that marketplace emerging. Here's why. I think it is a virtuous circle. There's a risk this virtuous circle runs the wrong way, but I'm, again, an optimist. I think it's going to go the right way. And I think that is, good AI products are only going to be good provided the customers are satisfied with the output and the quality of the output that comes from it, and that they can trust it. It's particularly true when it comes to perishable data like news, but true in general. And so it isn't true to say that LLMs, and I know large language models are absolutely finding this, that you can take all the information from the internet once, build a large language model, and you're done. Right? You have to keep that information fresh, and you have to have that supply of data.
Otherwise it becomes stagnant. And
now that's good news, right? Because I want to supply that. And so there's a customer demand, there is a intermediary demand. The software company needs it to keep their customers happy, and we want to supply it. That is a virtuous circle, and if we can build the right marketplace, value should flow right through that back to the originator, which incentivizes us to produce it, which allows the middleman to take it, and so on, and so the cycle completes. So I am optimistic that there are sufficient dynamics in this environment for an effective marketplace, not only to be needed, but to appear. A marketplace needs standards, though, and I'll say standards rather than rules. And at the moment, if we look at the licensing market that's emerged over the last couple of years, there are, and certainly if I look at the many different licensing conversations that we've been in, there are very different standards expected and demanded on both sides. And frankly, it's quite arduous for both parties, and it's not very helpful because it means that the market is emerging too slowly. So hold that thought, and I think, let me sort of go back perhaps 15 years to a period that I think is analogous, which is the programmatic advertising marketplace.
Yes, of course.
And I think
Pangea.
And I think there are many things that are in common. If you look at what the programmatic marketplace did, it effectively took the value that publishers created, audiences, and it said, I'm going to break that audience down, I'm going to call it a data point, and I'm going to commoditize it, and I'm only going to buy the data point that I want, and I'm going to run that through an auction. Now, it turned out that is a terrible business model for many news publishers. It totally commoditizes the value they create, environment and audience. And overall, because of an oversupply, prices have trended down. And with a few exceptions, I don't think that's been a great move for the publishing industry. I think it's been particularly a bad move because the rules for that marketplace were set by the intermediary layer, ad tech, or they were set by the big buyers. I think many of those similar traits are true here, that if we are talking about a licensing marketplace that isn't taking en masse, but is only selecting certain reference data that fits a certain criteria for a particular query, and it is taking that at a token level, in other words, not sentences or articles, but fragments of it, there are quite a few parallels there to that dynamic. I think it would be a huge mistake for publishers to say, let's allow an intermediary tech layer, or let's allow the buyer market to set the rules of that marketplace. I think we've seen this movie before, and I think the opportunity here is for the suppliers to say, what we've got is too valuable. And actually it's existential that we get this right. If we don't get it right, we have a very big problem and no incentive to stay in business. So Spur is about saying, let's set the standards as a publisher collective. And if you want to buy from us, you can buy from us independently. But here's what we expect in terms of telemetry, in terms of the presence of the brand, in terms of how much you can take verbatim and reproduce verbatim, in terms of onward usage, those sort of things that allow a marketplace to function effectively. So that's what Spur's about,
but this
taking
is the governance
initiative.
of the,
Absolutely. It's absolutely not about collective negotiation. It is about saying, if you want to buy from us, we all agree these are the minimum standards of what we should expect in a licensing arrangement.
So in a nutshell, it's so the whole industry can monetize AI uniformly is where you're going with
if it wants to.
If
absolutely.
it wants to. Right, okay. And you're confident about this as an initiative?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, I think the demand that we've seen has been terrific. I think the setup that comes along with it, it's not about massive layers of governance. We're not trying to set up some great big architecture with a sort of ruling party, and it's pretty lightweight. It's about getting the right people in the room to think through what are the problems and what are the obvious answers. It is also, by the way, very much about engaging with the people that we hope to do business with and saying, well, what would work for you? This isn't just about saying, well, here's what we say, we don't care what you think. So it has to be about that engagement, and there has been good engagement from a number of large institutions and large developers who say, well, we see the value here too, and actually this makes life a bit easier for us because we haven't got to run 35 separate arrangements. We can just set it up once and away we go. So that's the principle behind it. It's early days, right? But yes, I think it has a great opportunity, great future.
I mean, I'm sure you know at the AG Sulzberger did this quite smashing speech a little while ago about LLMs and the tech companies, and he made one which I thought was a really, really interesting point, which was that these very big companies are willing to spend enormous amount of money on the things that they need to keep their companies going, which are, number one is talent. So any amount of money for the right engineers, etc., to be bought in from anywhere. Another one is energy, buying whatever energy you need to keep the data centers running. Unlimited amount of money for compute. So any type of chips that you need, we'll pay whatever it takes. And then the fourth aspect is data. For them, it's data. For you, it's journalism. For us, it's journalism. It was a fascinating point because what he was saying is that we'll pay for the first three, but we're not prepared to pay for the fourth. This is obviously a huge question in the industry.
I think I put it slightly differently. They have to pay for the first three. They think they can get away without paying for the last.
For the
last.
I mean,
I've heard a similar sort of that example a couple of times, and I think it is. I think it's right. I think it's. I think he's spot on with that.
I suppose it's also looking at it in a certain way, which is that for them it's just data, but for us it's a profession.
I mean,
a very high value output.
It is asymmetrical, right? And I think this is one of the interesting things about establishing value in the marketplace is, we invest our heart and souls into producing relatively small file of content every day, perfectly crafted, 6,500 years worth of experience going into the production of it. Very, very high value. The user of that service, if we're talking about the software developer, does not see it in that way. They see it as an input amongst many others, answering millions and tens of millions of queries to which they have no foresight around. It is a very different use, which presents a different value. That is as it may be. It is still absolutely right that fair price is paid for the use of the intellectual property that we've created. So I'm absolutely with AG on that one.
Great. Jon, and just, maybe this is sort of a follow-up on the Spur piece, but you've said before that trust isn't something that a single newsroom can defend on its own. It's an ecosystem property, or it's an ecosystem responsibility. And you yourself you have been widely quoted as saying a rising tide lifts all ships. That's one thing you're very well known for saying. So do you see, the FT is in this very distinct and premium position in the marketplace as the CEO of this company? Do you see part of your responsibility as being to bring these communities together, Spur being one of them, to help lead the discussions on some of the threats that the industry is facing?
When I said that trust was an ecosystem property, actually what I had in mind was not so much the creators of journalism, but all of those that sit in the ecosystem, which includes the gateways to that journalism and the distributors of it and the platforms where people find that journalism. And I think there is significant responsibility there too, not just amongst the people that create the journalism. I think about trust a lot, and I think about these things quite a bit. And I was on a call this morning with a group of 17, 18-year-olds who've been spending some time doing work experience with us. They brought up the question of trust and said, it's all well and good you talking about you should trust us, you should trust the FT. But you have to agree that there has got to be bias in aspects of what you do. We all have bias somewhere. But it's absolutely right, isn't it? Facts are objective. Truth, to some degree, is subjective, becoming increasingly so, right? So I think we've got to be a little bit mindful of that. We don't want to get sort of too much on our high horse and say there is never any bias in anything we do.
Of course.
Right? There is never any intentional bias in our news reporting, but absolutely we will have opinion, and that opinion will be opinionated. That's by nature of what it is. And it's incumbent, I think, on the news industry to make sure that we are being clear what is news reporting, which should be bias-free, and what is opinion. And I think where I struggle a little bit with elements of the news industry is where there is an intentional conflation between opinion and news.
Becoming profitable.
That's why. And that is what's causing the trust deficit in news that we're seeing very clearly in things like the Edelman Trust Barometer. Trust is an ecosystem property. The FT has a part to play in that. All participants do, the distributors, the gateways, the platforms, and also the producers of news themselves. And we should not imagine that we are immune from criticism, criticism, about the damage we are doing ourselves to trust in news. So we should tread carefully as an industry. Now, do I feel a particular responsibility to everybody else? Absolutely not. No, I feel a particular responsibility to the FT, and everybody else is entitled to do what they want to.
Indeed.
I think there are some areas where we can collaborate much better. And yes, I think Spur is a great example of that.
Well, thank you for your honesty. That's important. One question on strategy, and then we have a wildcard question at the end that I've saved for you. When we are thinking about a company like the FT and other premium media brands, they are increasingly moving away from being a news business or just a news business to becoming collections of high margin niche businesses. So in the FT, for example, we've got events businesses, we've got a professional business with data tools, specialist businesses. How do you manage as a CEO the tension between that sort of slow, deliberate nature of news and these faster, high margin businesses that you're building, and how do you manage that tension within
it's difficult.
An organization?
It's difficult. You're absolutely right that the institutional muscle, I think, of the FT is towards the cycle of news and all of the associated business operations that sit around that. When you have, and I would include actually our events business within that. I think it's journalism by a different expression. It's not written or audio. It's it's a live, in person, or indeed digital thing. If you look at where we've really diversified and we've moved into consulting, the dynamics and rhythm of that are very different, and it is not easy to assimilate that into the rhythms of how financial processes work at the FT, which are quarterly forecasts and monthly risk and opportunities reporting, and staffing levels need to rise and fall fast depending on demand. It's not easy. We have not always got it right. We will continue to do our best. But I think we have to look at, do all of these pieces join up? Do they make sense? Are they cohesive? And I think at the moment in particular, we have to look at where our appetite is for risk around further diversification, or investing more in what we know we do
core,
best.
yeah.
And I would define our core as businesses that are directly related to the production of journalism. When we're in a position to take more risk, then perhaps the diversification gets further away from that, and we look at businesses or lines of business which we have an authority to operate in that space because of our brand, or we wouldn't be looking at it, but they are several steps of remove away from the production of journalism. They are more about the authority of the brand itself. If you're in a riskier period, you can certainly stretch yourself further away. I would describe that as a healthy, organic conversation that the board has regularly, but it is difficult. Right?
It doesn't just happen easily.
No.
And I don't think you're alone in that. I think that that's something that you would hear from most CEOs of media businesses that have done these diversification programs over the years and had to leave things behind, double down on other things. It's a constant moving feast, really. My final question for you, which is the most fun of the lot. I don't know if the number's right, but we're going to try it anyway. If the board handed you a completely ring-fenced £10 million tomorrow with the express condition that you cannot spend it on marketing or the current core product, what high-risk, high-reward bet would you place on the future of media?
Oh, so I can't just spend it on having a good time?
You can't spend it on yourself.
Okay, all right. Okay. That's an important clarifier.
That's your bonus. This is your board bet.
Okay. I think I have a specific answer for you on that.
Okay.
I would say, taking it back to where I started about this sort of moment for society, the world, but very much the news industry and the FT, which is this sort of huge period of disruption, it feels like a very, very good time to be experimenting. Experimentation is costly and often fails. And finding the capacity and the headroom to experiment when you're in a difficult, broad economic environment, as we all are, can be hard. Having the courage to take money away from something that's a sure bet and put it towards an experiment instead, that can be difficult. But if you aren't doing R&D and you aren't experimenting and you're not taking advantage of reimagining, as I was saying earlier, what could journalism be? How could technology play a part in how we run our operations? Then I think that's a problem. So I would, no strings attached, £10 million, I would say, here's an R&D fund.
Amazing.
And I'm going to fund 5 experiments from staff, £2 million each. Give me your best ideas.
Oh, I love it.
And I think I'd probably do something like that. See what came out of it.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I really
It does, doesn't it? I'd love to do that.
I know. I think we're going to have to find 10 million somewhere.
That would be great.
To do that.
We'll have it down the back of the sofa.
John, thank you very much.
A pleasure.
We thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate your time. And thanks for giving us the time.
Yeah,
today.
my great pleasure.
Okay.
Thanks for asking me.
Pleasure.